So, hello everybody. I am Catherine. I'm the head bookworm at the ShelterBox Book Club, and welcome to our event, The Making of Tamesis Street, a celebration of the book that we've created and the community that has brought it to life. I'm going to talk a little bit over the next hour about who we are and how we got here and how we created this wonderful book. And then I'll be handing over to some of our amazing contributors for a few readings and messages about why they joined the book. And then we've got our panel discussion with the wonderful authors Will Menmuir, Monique, Roffey and Joanne Harris discussing creativity, climate change and why they wanted to take part in the project. Then we'll have a few more readings and a few more videos, and then I'll tell you all about how you can get your copy of Tamesis Street. So, what is ShelterBox? ShelterBox is an international disaster relief charity based in Cornwall. We provide emergency shelter and household items to families around the world who've lost everything after disaster. We were started in the year 2000, and in the 21 years that we've existed, we've helped over 2 million people all across the world through our longest response has been in Syria, where we've been supporting families displaced by the conflict. Our most recent response is in Haiti after the earthquake a few months ago, where we're supporting 2,000 families with emergency shelter, as I say, and some household items. And we do that because we believe that shelter is a human right, and that particularly after disasters and when people have lost everything, that having a space to call your own gives you the space to be able to recover and to start thinking about the future. And especially when you've lost everything, we know that people around the world have really ingenious and resilient ways of coming up with recovery options and the steps that they're going to take, but they need a place to be able to think of those things and to be able to get past the immediate needs of where they're going to sleep, what they're going to eat, and how they're going to keep their family dry. And over the last year, it's been ever more important that families have had a place to seclude themselves in the pandemic and to keep themselves away from lots of people and to have that space. So that's why we do it, and we're really passionate about it. And it's only down to the supporters we have in the UK and around the world that we are able to support any of those families. And that leads me nicely onto the ShelterBox Book Club. So the ShelterBox Book Club is a book subscription service for people who love books and who love making a difference around the world. And we read books inspired by the families that we've supported around the world. So they're international stories, short story collections, novels, and autobiographies. That we choose every 6 weeks on a theme, and then we read those books, and then we have discussions and events like this. So we have online calls and Q&As with the authors of those books, and also have online Zoom calls where we chat as a big group, and Facebook debates where we put the questions out and people get to chat amongst themselves about the answers to what they think of the books. So yeah, that's Book Club. And what is Tamesis Street? So Tamesis Street is the first book published by ShelterBox and by the ShelterBox Book Club. And it is the story of Atyiah and her dog Alfie, who live on a street in Greenwich in London in the year 2050. It is a story of a climate crisis, a climate intensified rain deluge that hits London and threatens to breach the Thames barrier. And it is about Atyiah and her neighbours, who she doesn't necessarily know very well prior to this event, but how they come together to survive that event, and how they take the next steps after that. So it's the Hollywood-esque crisis moment, but also the story afterwards and what people do and how they survive. So I'm going to ask a rhetorical question, which is, would you like to hear a preview? I know you would. So I'm going to ask Monique if she is happy to read out her section of the book, which is the very beginning. Yes, please, Monique.
Sure, I will. Sure.
Thank you.
And I was delighted that I got to write the opening. No pressure or anything, but it was still, I was delighted. So here we go. Rain used to be a sound Atyiah loved. Lying in bed, with rain on the roof, a good book, Alfie curled up in his basket, a fire in the hearth, water dripping in straight lines down the window panes. Atyiah had loved rain once. It gave her a strange inward feeling and permission to stop and reflect. Rain used to bring with it memories of good things. Her childhood trips to Malawi, where they sang songs to greet the coming of the yearly rains. Her time in Malaysia, teaching, excitement for the children as rain brought daily nourishment. Rain made things flourish and gave her a feeling of reassurance that everything was on track. The earth would replenish as if by magic. The world was what it was, always had been. In springtime, the earth gobbled rain and sprang forth buds. Rain washed the world, and the world, grateful, drank. Rain was a harbinger of new life. But today, no. She walked home, cowered under a sturdy umbrella, a feeling of frustration as the rain pounded. The East London streets gurgled around her. When she peered left towards the river, she saw Mama Thames groaning under her own weight. Old Mama Thames was muddy grey and her hips were swollen. The tide was more than up. It was breaching at every curve, sandbags everywhere, and the islands in the middle had been evacuated. Westminster abandoned a week ago, and the embankments deserted on both sides. Once, she'd been excited about her new home on Tamesis Street in Greenwich, near the banks of this famous old river woman. But now, no. Now Atyiah laboured to get home. Her phone buzzed on her wrist. She swiped at it. It was a message. Her best friends had arrived safely in the Peak District for their holiday. Such a great book.
Amazing. Thank you, Monique.
Yeah.
I forgot to introduce you, but I'm sure many people already know that Monique is the best-selling author of Mermaid of Black Conch, as well as many other books, but we'll see you again in a moment. So Tamesis Street, if you're anything like me, Monique's reading will make you really want to just keep going. And I've already read it, so yeah, so very exciting. So how did we get to this point? We started thinking about this in June, July 2020, so a while ago now, and we wanted to do something that celebrated our community and bring people together. Even though we were kept apart by the pandemic, we'd seen, particularly through our book club, how much joy we could get from an online community and from reaching out across the country and the world. And so we were trying to come up with ways that we could bring together lots of people in a literary way. And initially we thought of the game Consequences. So you'll probably remember it from when you were a child, where we would, you'd take a piece of paper and you'll start, there's two versions, so a word version or a picture version, and you'd start either with the head of somebody or with a once upon a time, and you would fold it over, the piece of paper over once you'd written a bit, and then the next person would only be able to see either the bottom lines of the neck or the very last bit of your paragraph, and they'd continue on from there and then fold it over and pass it on, and it'd go around in a circle, and then at the very end you unravel this scroll of paper and you get either a chaotic picture or a hilarious story that jumps and jolts around the place and is a joy to write and a joy to read, and yeah, is bizarre and wonderful all at the same time. And we thought, what a good idea. Let's do like a world record version of that and get lots of authors and lots of people from ShelterBox and some of our book club members and supporters and lots of people, and do this world record version of Consequences. And then we thought, actually, those are really chaotic, and I'm not sure that the end version of that is going to be something anyone wants to read. Like, the joy of the game is that it's a short, small thing, and that the process of it is really fun. But you don't really end up with a beautiful piece of writing at the end. So then we thought, okay, let's come up with a story, and what story should we tell? So we wanted to tell a story that was really rooted in ShelterBox. And so we worked with our operations team to find out, like, what are the things that happen in every disaster we work in? Like, what are the steps that everything goes through, no matter whether it's a flood or a storm, like what sort of things happen again and again, and particularly what are the hopeful moments that make it feel less like a disaster. Obviously there's terrible things happening, but what makes people feel hopeful? And the thing that came out of that was that sense of community and people coming together, which again we saw last year in the pandemic, and now still, where we've come together with our neighbours, and they've been a real strength for us, and communities have become much stronger and closer. And that's given us all hope. So we pulled together a really loose story, and we put 30 sentences together. And then we started reaching out to friends. So authors, celebrity authors, book club members, partners that we work with around the world, and members of the ShelterBox team. And really wonderfully, we were able to also bring in some of our beneficiaries, some of the people we've actually been able to support. We were able to use some of their stories in the book, which added a whole nother dimension. And then once we'd sent the asks out, we waited patiently for sections to come back in, and responded sort of accordingly. So we laughed, we cried, we had all the emotions, because the story really went in lots of directions as people wrote it and as it came back in. And then we pulled it all together, and we were a little worried that we had made consequences, and we didn't know if it was going to read properly, because everyone had written their parts in isolation, and very few people had seen the sections before theirs. So we waited with bated breath to see if it would come together, and luckily it did. And then the story was so beautiful, we felt the only way to kind of honor the work that had gone into it, and the words and the story it was telling, was to create a really beautiful book, which was not the initial intention, but was the only option once we had the words. So we put it all together, and we worked with an amazing illustrator called Dan Jennings to do the illustrations throughout. Sneak preview. And then we asked Sir Quentin Blake if he might illustrate the front cover, which he very kindly agreed to do. And then we got in touch with our patron, the Duchess of Cornwall, who kindly wrote a foreword for the book, and the amazing youth climate activist Vanessa Nakate to write an afterword for the story. And she did so beautifully, drawing from the fictional story we've created and talking about how this is fictional at the moment for us, but actually the real story of the impacts of climate change on people's homes is happening all around the world, and particularly in countries like hers in Uganda. So we were honoured to have those people and all of our contributors bring together this book, and we launched it to the world just recently, and it's had a great response so far, and we're just eager for as many people as possible to read it and to see it and to hear about it, because it is our joy, and has been a joy for us to work on. So next section, would you like to hear about some of the characters? It's another rhetorical question. I know you do. So I'm going to ask the Sunday Times bestseller Veronica Henry if she would read her section for us, which comes a little bit further into the story, and we meet some of Isla's neighbours.
Hello, I feel a little bit as if I'm doing Jack and Ori, for anybody old enough to remember that. Yes, so this is introducing 4 of the characters in one of the houses on Tamesis Street. English rain was the one thing Louis couldn't get used to. It got into his bones, which was bad for a dancer, and made him long for the sweet heat of Havana. He missed the sun more than he missed his crazy, noisy family, for his housemates were his family now. Trainee Dr. Mei Ying reminded him of his sisters, with her passion for clothes, even if they were a little out of touch. She called it vintage, he called it old-fashioned. The clothes she wore from the noughties were what his abuela used to wear. But she made him spicy guacamole with the bags of avocados she brought home, and always let him take a spoonful to eat with his huevos. Elliot was growing on him, even if he did take things apart in the lounge while they watched TV. Elliot loved to know how things work, and Louis could see his meticulous engineer's mind ticking over while he dismantled any household items that refused to work. Elliot was from Malawi, and like Louis, he found the English rain unsettling. They were right to be unsettled, he thought then, looking out of the window at the relentless downpour. As for Victoria, she tormented him by leaving irresistible cakes on the kitchen table. Louis told her off. He was supposed to watch his weight. A Prix de Lausanne artist at the Royal Ballet was not supposed to eat such temptations. Victoria laughed and said it was her parents' fault for naming her after a sponge. That was the other thing he wasn't used to yet, the English sense of humour. But Victoria was kind. He knew that, and he admired the work she did, fundraising for a disaster relief charity. They'd all let their hair down when he taught them how to salsa in the kitchen the other night. Mei Ying made mojitos and Victoria made quesadilla, and Elliot fixed the old record player Mei Ying had found in an antique shop so they could dance to her collection of vinyl. He trusted his housemates, even if he didn't always understand them, and they worked well together, like they were then, searching the house, calling to each other over the thundering rain.
Do, do, do. Sorry, there's lots of cliffhangers in this. Thank you so much, Veronica. Yeah, long-term book club members might notice that some of the characters are inspired by some of the stories we've read in the past and some of the people who've worked on book club in the past. So when you get your copy, I'm intrigued to see if you'll find who they are. Brilliant. So we asked some of our other contributors why they wanted to get involved in the project and what they thought of it. So some of them couldn't join us this evening, and you're getting a sneak preview of lovely Will, who we'll be talking to in a minute, and we're going to play some of their thoughts in a moment now.
Let me introduce you to Tamesis Street. It's designed to show the impact of climate change on communities through the fictional story of what would happen if London flooded.
The story of climate change is being told by all of us, all around the world. Right now, it may be the single most important story that we tell. And it makes all the sense in the world that such a multitude of voices would come together to create this story of climate disaster.
I love Consequences as a game, but this book is something else, and it's really serious. I don't know how anyone got it together, but they did. I salute you all. Read it.
I really wanted to be involved in the Tamesis Street writing project in order to support the vital and urgent work that ShelterBox is doing in those places that have become hardest hit by the effects of climate change.
As the climate crisis grows ever less a threat and ever more a reality, of course, I jumped at the chance to contribute to Tamesis Street, and I hope you'll jump at the chance to buy a copy and help ShelterBox and the cause. Thank you.
It's a great read, it's a great book, and it's a great cause. Please support it.
I have to sort of constantly pinch myself with the amount of amazing people who've joined this book. And I think we might have a few other people on the call who've joined us. So hello, and thank you to Charmaine, Mary Noel and Kaylee, who I think are in the background here as well. Thank you. So on to our next bit. We've got a chock-a-block hour for you. So we've got our panel discussion now. Joining us this evening, we have the brilliant authors Will Menmuir, Monique Roffey and Joanne Harris. I'm going to introduce each of them and ask an initial question, and then we'll open it out to the audience for your own questions. So to ask a question, on the bottom of your screen in the control panel, there is a section called Q&A. Type your questions into that section and they'll appear. And if you haven't got a question but you want to be involved, you can look through the questions that are there and you can like them, and we'll see which ones are most popular and we'll ask those, because we probably won't have time to get through all of them. And if you would like to read out your question, so come on screen and say hello, please raise your hand, which again is on the control panel at the bottom of your screen, and we will invite you to come and turn on your camera and ask your question in person, so it feels a bit more like we're all here, because that's really nice to see everyone's faces. So our panel. Will Menmuir is a novelist and editor based in Cornwall. His best-selling debut novel, The Many, was nominated for the Man Booker Prize in 2016 and was followed up by the brilliant Foxfires this year. He's the co-creator of the Cornish Writing Centre and works on national literacy programmes with the likes of the National Literacy Trust, and is also a lecturer in creative writing at Falmouth University. His next work, a non-fiction book called The Drawer of the Sea, has just been announced and will be available in 2023. Welcome, Will. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Our next panelist is Monique Roffey, who is an award-winning Trinidadian-born British writer of novels, essays, literary journalism, and a memoir. Her most recent novel, The Mermaid of Black Conch, won the Costa Book of the Year award last year and was nominated for 7 other major awards. Her 5 other books have also been nominated for a number of prizes and have been translated into many languages. She is a co-founder of Writers Rebel within Extinction Rebellion and a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University and a tutor for the National Writers Centre. Welcome, Monique. Thank you for joining us. And our third panelist is Joanne Harris, MBE, who is best known for her beautiful novel Chocolat, which was made into an Oscar-nominated film starring Juliette Binoche. She is much more than that, though, having published 20 novels, plus novellas, short stories, game scripts, the libretto for 2 operas, screenplays, a musical, and 3 cookbooks from her magical writing shed. She is a passionate advocate for the author's rights and is currently the chair of the Society of Authors. Welcome, Joanne. So our first question sort of has to be is when you got our message about Tamesis Street, what was it that made you want to take part? And I'll go to Will for that answer first, please.
Got to find the unmute button first. What was it? I think sometimes an idea comes along that just strikes a chord immediately and makes you think. It didn't take an awful lot of thought. I thought it's a really playful idea and also slightly terrifying. It is slightly terrifying to write a middle section of a book of which you only know a little bit about the story on either side, and I think there's a lot of trust involved, trust in your fellow writers, and luckily, you know, you've had such amazing writers to work on this, and it was a real pleasure to be invited. But also to trust yourself that the bit that you write is going to fit in. So yeah, it was one of those playful ideas for a very good cause that yeah, immediately sort of said yes to Sarah when she got in touch.
And we're very grateful that you did. I'm going to be a bit like Cilla Black. Same question to Monique, please. Oh wait, you're on mute, I'm afraid. Sorry.
There you go. As Patrick Gale said, I also jumped at it without a moment's, I didn't hesitate at all. And so quite a long time ago now, about 12 years ago, my brother's house was demolished in a flood, and I saw him and his entire street neighborhood get washed away, and what that looked like and how badly it impacted on him, his family, everybody else. And I wrote a novel in the aftermath of that. And I've also been active with Extinction Rebellion and set up a active campaigning group. So what this is an opportunity for as a writer, it's the perfect storm of being able to do what I do, which is write, and also be ecologically active. So it's just like ticks 2 boxes. It's win-win. Also, it's just so creative. And again, that thing, consequences, you know, it's just brilliant. It's a fantastic idea. I hope you make lots of money with it. Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly what writers need to start doing. You know, do what we do, and then at some point it brings in some bucks for ShelterBox and other aid, relief agencies.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's been like a lot of we'll hear more from it in some of the clips coming up, but there's a lot of personal connection that people have drawn into the story, which is, yeah, really brought it to life. Joanne, what made you want to join us? Because you were really early on as well.
Well, first of all, it was a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful cause. But also, I think, I spend so much time in my shed writing on my own that I always jump at the opportunity for a collaboration, because it's so interesting to see what other people will manage to generate if everybody comes together on one project. So I thought, this is great. This is something that we can all do together. And I've always felt so strongly about the power of story to change the world. And so the idea that there would be these 30 authors helping to change the world through this story was just irresistible.
Oh, yeah, it does sound hard to say no to, actually, now you put it like that. Amazing, thank you. Okay, so we've got some questions here. We've got one from Michelle. So Michelle, are you happy to come on screen? Yep, I'm gonna bring you up and you can ask your question live. Let's see how well this works. Always a pause. There we go. Hello.
Hello. Hi to the amazing panel. I was wondering, would you be able to tell us what it was like to write a section of a story when you hadn't seen any of the other sections?
Brilliant. Let's ask Joanne first, because she was one of our earlier ones. So there weren't even any sections to see when you wrote yours.
Well, this is it. And I chose a section which I would be able to construct out of just the idea of the main character and her setting. And so I wrote that about place, particularly because I didn't know the characters well enough yet to write too much about them. And so I just wanted to make it evocative. And I thought, okay, I'll do it that way. But it's a bit scary writing in isolation, because you never know whether it's going to fit or whether it's going to be stylistically inappropriate or whether it's going to be just glaringly out of place. So I was just sitting there with my fingers crossed, hoping that the piece would be the right shape in the end.
I'm going to say it is. It's beautiful. I love it. Will, how did you find it? You were right in the middle.
Yeah, I think I'd go further than Joanne and say it's a bit terrifying if you start to think about it. So I think it is the approach I took was not to think about it too much and not to think how it would fit in and not really to consider what other people would do around it, because I had the little one-liners about the story generally, but aside from that, yeah, there was a lot of scope for people to do other things with it. So I thought it's far better really not to consider the other writers at all and just hope, sort of cross all fingers. And no, I think it's worked beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Well, we think so too. Monique, how is yours? Because you're sort of starting, so it's kind of easier to. Oh, you're muted again. Sorry.
Sorry, so it was a combination of oh dear God, I've got to get this right. Getting the opening paragraphs, and also quite liberated, because I thought, well, this is the beginning, I don't have to worry about what they're talking about. I'm going to open the story with rain, and but also you kind of did help us a bit and say, in this piece we'd like you to introduce characters and so I did have some bones to go on. But yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. I again, like Will said, I didn't think, if you think too much, you can get completely gridlocked and stymied. I just went for it. Yeah. And I love this idea of the, I've been researching another novel and this idea of the Thames, Mama Thames, and she's full of old swords, and people have been throwing things in the Thames for like millennium. People have been worshipping river goddesses and throwing their swords, their plates, everything, which is why the mudlarkers, they just come up with so much treasure.
Yeah, And actually, when you wrote your section and sent it back, we didn't have a title yet, but the Thames came through so powerfully then that's the kind of the origin of our title, because Tamesis Street. Tamesis is the like old Brittonic and Roman word for Thames, and then we found out there wasn't actually a Tamesis Street, so we weren't going to be too attached, but there should be really. And yeah, so the old Mama Thames is becomes the the main protagonist really.
And yes, I mean old Londiniums is all sort of on the banks, you know, sort of almost just tiny little clusters. Our first civilization were on the curvy bits of the Thames, first bridges that went over. Yeah,
brilliant. Cool. So we've got a question from, let's do Barbara Hogarth. Are you okay? Do you want to read yours out, Barbara? If you put your hands up, I can see that, but if not, I'll read it out for you. Yes, there we go. Here she comes. Right, it takes a moment, but I think it's worth it. There you are, Barbara. Let's see. Can we see you? Nearly.
Oh.
There we go. Hello.
Hello. I've lost my question.
Oh.
I can't see what I've written. Sorry.
About the collaborative format being coherent.
Yeah. Would you mind reading it out, Catherine?
Yes, I can. So you wrote, do you think this collaborative format works to make a coherent book? And would you do a similar project? And if so, how may it be improved upon? Who would you like to answer first?
Who would like to answer first? I'll go left to right on my screen. I'll go to Monique first.
Okay.
If I can.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the question. I'm so sorry. So could you say it again?
I'll read it again, don't worry. So it was, do you think that this format helps to make a coherent book? And would you do a similar project in the future? And if so, how could it be improved upon?
Yes and yes. Yes, it has worked. Yes, I would do it again. How would I improve on it? I think you could go bigger. I think you could do something much bigger, more novelly, like give, rather than 30 writers, maybe, I don't know, 20 writers a chapter. You go bigger.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds really exciting.
You get a chapter each, or something bigger, or a screenplay. Let's write a movie.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yes, you started something here, Catherine. Okay. Will, what's your thoughts on it?
I think there are so many different directions in which you could take it. So there are all sorts of different options. Like I suppose you could have an almost pass the baton, in which you pass it to authors in different countries, maybe using some sort of logic. I'm not quite sure what. I've only just thought of the idea off the top of my head. But I think in keeping with the game idea. Is just I'm sure there are tons of different ways in which you can do it. Do I think it works? Yes, I do think it works, and I think it comes back to something that Monique said earlier about the fact that maybe we ought to be doing a bit more than this. And actually Joanne touched on it as well when talking about writers writing away in their garret or their shed, and very much feeling alone for lots of the year. It's a really nice thing to do as an author. I think we ought to be doing a lot more of it. But also I think when you read it back, you do sense that those differences in writing styles, and it's lovely to feel part of something bigger. So yes, that's my answer.
Yeah. So I obviously haven't seen the book yet. So do you feel that the different writing styles flow together and they work together?
In short, yes, I do. For me, it was a lovely reading experience, actually. And I think because it was so uncertain, I had no idea what the rest of the book would be like. It was that moment of starting to read it, just sparing Monique's blushes. You don't have to listen to this, Monique. It was really lovely to read those opening paragraphs and just think, this is going to be good. And it was when I got to Mama Thames, I started to nod, and that's when I know that, yeah, you've got me from those opening paragraphs.
And Joanne, I'm just moving across my screen. So Joanne, what was your thinking about this? Did you find it as exciting as the other two writers?
Oh yes, I think so. I mean, this is a technique I've used before. I don't know if the rest of you are part of the fan fiction writing community, but a few years ago I was part of one of these communities, and I started a chain story, which eventually became a 500-page novel, I suppose, written by just 5 or 6 people, and we kept passing the baton to each other. And of course, we followed the development of this story, and this is something that, you know, I've always thought would work really well in Monique's idea to actually write a novel. It would be quite difficult, I think, to coordinate, because as the plot got more and more complicated, you would have to keep passing it and everyone would have to read it. But it's so nice to be able to integrate other people's voices into one coherent narrative, and actually to pick out the things that people like to do. Some people like to do interactions, some people like to do dialogues. It being the fan fiction community, some people just want to write sex scenes. I'm not going to tell you which one I was, but it's so nice to have that sense of community with an occupation which is not normally thought of in that way, and it's so creative. And, you know, I found, I mean, I was the only professional writer there, but nobody knew who I was. And it was so interesting to see how much talent there was and how much confidence was being built, and how this story just grew and grew. And I'm sure that not one of us would have written it that way if it had just been a solo project.
And Ronnie, last I think but not least, what are your thoughts on the collaboration and how it worked?
Well, funnily enough, I'm sort of used to it because I used to write continuing series and soap operas for the BBC and ITV. So it's sort of, I'm very used to picking up something from somebody before me and then passing on the baton to somebody else. Obviously, there's not as much creative freedom when you're writing something like Holby or Heartbeat, because you have to stick to the rules. And I think the lovely thing about this was we were allowed a certain amount of freedom because we just had a little sentence to follow, and then that was up to us as writers, which is fantastic. I mean, that's the joy of writing, isn't it? Is being given a little source of inspiration and then making it yours, really. So yeah, this was even more exciting, really, because it was, you know, the message is so important. So the theme that held us all together was something that kept us focused, I think. But within that we had our own voices, so we've got one clear message that we're all shouting out, but we've all got our little voices within that, making it distinct.
There seems to be this amazing energy coming from the 4 of you there, and also from you, Catherine, and everybody else. It just makes me want to get hold of this book.
It's coming soon. I'll tell you more about it in a moment. Thank you so much, Barbara.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So there's a question, Alice, I've already promoted you, so I'm going to ask you to read out your question that's been voted up quite a lot.
Hello, everybody. Can you can hear and see me, can't you? Oh, sorry, the dog's grumbling in the background. I just want to say thank you. What a fantastic panel, and I'm really excited to receive my copy now. But as a climate activist myself, I was really quite pleased to see this project in itself shining a spotlight on the human impact of climate change, which can be overlooked. But it sort of dawned on me with this conversation that actually for us to overcome the climate crisis, we need to work together, and it's wonderful that the creation of this book is reflected in that. I think that's really, really lovely. So I'd love to ask the panel, how can creative people like writers yourselves help address the climate crisis? Sorry, I think my dog also agrees.
Oh, Monique, you're muted, but yes, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So a couple of years ago, actually sent out a tweet. I think it was during that pink boat that appeared in Oxford Street. And I remember having a week off to, I was at uni and I had 3 weeks off to do some writing. And I knew that I had a whole week that I was just going to sit and write, and there's nothing that was going to drag me from my writing desk, you know, where I just sit and write, and, you know, as we all do. And then social media were just flooded with this pink boat and what they were doing, and they had trees all over the place. And eventually I just got up and went. And weirdly, about a dozen of my friends had the same reaction to that rebellion. And I started bumping into people I'd known. I knew, or we all kept texting and, you know, where are you? I'm on Waterloo Bridge. I'm here, I'm there. A couple of my friends are sort of locking themselves onto, but, you know, they've got backgrounds in activism and they were locked onto the pink boat, and somebody, almost, I would say half the people I know had were similarly inspired by that rebellion. And I sent out a tweet saying, what on earth are we all going to do as writers about climate change? And about 5 or 6 writers, well, a few actually got in touch, and then we formed a small group, and we managed to find our way into the media and messaging of Extinction Rebellion. And now we basically, what can writers do is get together and get off our bums. And, you know, what writers do is write, which is fine. But unfortunately, the writers I know, and I put my hand up, you know, what we're really good at doing is like being inert and inactive, and lots of tweeting, very good at armchair activism, tweeting away. But we really do need to get out there. We really do need to speak truth to power. We do need to be writing to MPs. We do need to be, I mean, the scientists have been posting up papers on public buildings. Doctors have been, you know, protesting. Every profession has been protesting in their own way. We've been organising all kinds of actions and events. We find that writers want to come out and do something glamorous. We had 40 writers reading in Trafalgar Square a couple of years ago, and we've done something at Tufton Street where all the think tanks are, and we're doing something for COP, and, you know, we're doing things, but writers want to help us do sort of active, glamorous things. But there's only a small core of us who are actually meeting weekly and plotting and planning, who are doing kind of donkey work. So it is proving to be quite challenging to get writers. We're all busy, but this is such a big problem that we're facing imminently. So what can writers do is just, you know, join Writers Rebel, join Extinction Rebellion. You know, you don't have to glue yourself to a building or get arrested, but there's so much else. So I would say this is a perfect example of 30 writers getting together and making something where there wasn't anything before. Sorry, I've taken up quite a bit of time there. Getting active.
Thank you.
Getting out of the shed.
As we all are now. Thank you. Will, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think that Monique said it perfectly, really. I think that's what we all ought to be doing. And I am certainly one of those writers who ought to get out of the shed more often. So yeah, I'm going to put that as my first action. So I think one of the things that writers can do is, and this is based on the research that I've been doing for my next book, which is a non-fiction book, where I've been talking to lots of scientists, marine biologists in particular. And what lots of them have been saying is we've got all of this data, but we're not, even the ones who are really good storytellers, we're not storytellers. We are scientists, and we quite often, we put across the balanced facts, which don't necessarily grab the hearts and minds, even though they should. So when someone on the other side of the argument is putting across a very emotive message, it can sometimes be a lot more effective than your scientists who's saying, well, on the one hand, we think this, but more research is needed. And I think that's always the way with science, because that's the truth of it, is that we've got certain data and then more research is needed. With the climate crisis, we have enough data now to say this is happening, this is a funnel into which we're going, and which may be long and terrible, or maybe shorter depending on our responses now. So I think that writers can amplify the voice of scientists. I think we should see more collaborations between writers and poets and scientists. I'd like to see a lot more of that.
Amazing. Well, hopefully this is the start of it. Not that it wasn't already started, but it's a continuation of what's happening, and hopefully it'll pick up pace and there'll be more. Joanne, do you have any final thoughts on how creative people and writers can help to draw attention to the climate crisis or address it?
Well, actually, it's funny because the Society of Authors is just about to launch a little campaign about this, to try to get us to sign open letters to our publishers to commit to being greener and more ecologically sound and more sustainable and viable, because actually publishing could potentially change in quite small ways to make a big difference. They could have a look at sustainable paper and acid-free paper and these sort of things, because unless we put pressure on them, publishers will be perfectly happy to keep going the way they always have done. But actually, you know, it doesn't take much. A couple of weeks ago, we had a Translators on the Cover open letter, which was signed by so many people that now big publishers have accepted to make this small but incredibly important change. And I think this is the way to do it. We have the power to put pressure on big publishing to make really important changes in this area, and we should do everything we can to do that and to help.
Amazing. How exciting. Can't wait to see the letter. We'll definitely sign. Well, I'm not a writer yet, but
I'll be tweeting it all over the show. You'll see it, all right.
Okay, well, we'll reshare it everywhere. Brilliant. So madly, the time has flown by, and so that's got to be the end of our panel discussion, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for joining us and for these wonderful questions. And stay tuned. We've got more to come. So I'm going to ask another rhetorical question. Would you like to hear a few more readings from the book? Of course you would. So first up, we've got Chris Packham. So this is a moment in the story when the elements are really taking over and the characters and the people of London are just trying to make it through. I think you'll agree that it is a rather dramatic piece. So I'll pass over to Chris.
Finn Visser could feel the soft rattle of his father's teeth chattering between his incessant coughing, and heard him cursing as the jostling crowd swelled. He was sodden. Icy water was guttering down his chest and pooling in his pants. The same rain that had been choking the sky for months had drowned his last memories of the sun, of colour, of anything but the sucking, stinking mud. Thousands milled and moaned in a gyrating mob. Some were shouting the names of their family lost in the crowd. Most were sobbing, slipping with sacks filled with what their lives had been, spilling their trinkets and scrabbling for tiny nothings that were so clearly worthless now. The filthy flotsam surged as fights sparked and weapons flashed, adding the only sparkles to the grubby palette of enormous human despair. It was all here in one final grotesque stew. All the crimes and vices that humanity's history had mustered, storm-wrecked and heading to a hill where it would make an inglorious last stand. There were no leaders, no valiant heroes rallying the spirits, no Spartacus, no Henry, no Winston, no band to play on as the waters rose. When his father jerked him onto his buckled shoulders, he peered through the squall at the map of disaster. The lead colour of the towers of London stood out against the greasy pewter of the Thames. A few distant lights flickered, sirens spluttered, and still it rained. And through the fog he squinted up at a fat moon, that patient satellite which had waited all these millennia to tug the tides and pull the finger out of the city's dike and flood the graves of those who stole the last vestiges of life's hope.
It's like a sucker punch. Yeah, wow. So to read more, you'll have to wait for your copy, but yeah, you'll see that the writing is wonderful. You'll also notice that Chris kindly did that beautiful reading for us just before he received his copy, but you all know what it looks like now. So yeah, one of the most powerful parts of this process has been working with our partners around the world who help us to deliver aid. So 4 of our contributors are people who we work with in that way. We've got Mary Noel from Atyiah Relief in Cameroon, Charmaine from Faith Inc. in the Philippines, Miriam from Habitat for Humanity, Malawi, and Ather from ReliefAid, who lives and works in Syria. We've had some messages from some of our partners that I wanted to share with you now, so I will pass over to them.
Elsa is similar to me in many ways, despite the different places and circumstances. When Elsa had to leave her home and felt lost, I was writing her feelings, and I returned the same feeling before 5 years ago when I was displaced from my home. In that time I was lost and I don't know what should I do or where should I go. And I felt that I had taken on more than I could handle. I feel sorry for everything that happened in my country. We just want a safe and decent life. I hope that our voices as Syrians will arrive and will reach us all the world. And this project will be a reason for our voice to be heard.
Living in a disaster-prone country, hearing and seeing stories while you are growing is quite an extraordinary experience for me. Ate Melrose story can be any Filipino family story in surviving intense natural disasters due to climate change. Incorporating her story in this collaborative work with ShelterBox was a very nice idea. With that being said, I'm so excited for this book to be launched, and I thank ShelterBox for developing projects like this.
Yeah, and we were so excited to be able to work with our partners in this way. And as Charmaine mentioned there, she used the story of somebody we've been able to support, Melrose, in her section. So she drew inspiration from Melrose's story. And we also have the story of a family led by Stefano and Mary in Malawi, who we've also incorporated into the story that, yeah, we were really privileged to be able to do. As we draw to a close, I wanted to share with you a reading from Ather, which I think might be the most powerful in the book. As she explained just then, she drew on her own experiences of being displaced by the Civil War and used that to give us an insight into the mind of our main character, Atyiah. So yeah, I won't describe it anymore, but here's Ather's reading.
Everything I built through my life has been destroyed in the blink of an eye. I will never see my home or even run in those streets again. What is really important for me? Is it home? Is it peace? I cannot find any answer in this situation. She tried to stop her trees, but they spilled like a water flow in the flood that washed the city. Her life like a straw floating on the surface of the water. She felt a storm of feelings of disappointment and anguish sweep over her. All my life is destroyed, she thought, feeling lonely and gloomy. Everything is hollow and meaningless. Where should I go? What will I do? She asked herself these 2 questions time and time again, but no answers came.
they're all really powerful, and particularly that one. As Ather said, she asked herself those questions 5 years ago and has since gone on to work for ReliefAid, our partners in Idlib in Syria, and she's found purpose again through supporting other families. You'll have to read the book to find out how Atyiah answers those questions and what she does with those questions herself. We've only done readings from the first half of the book, so there's a lot more to come, and we didn't want to spoil it for you, but I hope you're all eager to find out what happens next. So a quick recap of how you can get your copy of Tamesis Street. If you are already a member of the ShelterBox Book Club, you will be receiving your copy in the first 2 weeks of November to coincide with the COP26 conference. If you know somebody who would like to be a member, or you yourself would like to be a member, you can join up through ShelterBox.org and have a look for the book club section. It's on the homepage at the moment, so very easy. And also, if you know someone who you think might like this book for now or for Christmas, you can buy a gift voucher, a 3, 6 or 12-month membership to book club, and they'll receive a copy of Tamesis Street with that. If you're about to sign up, do so by the 26th of October and you'll get that first batch of books. And yeah, that's how you do it. As I say, www.shelterbox.org, and that's how you find out more about the book. I wanted to end on a quote from our CEO, who said something a couple of weeks ago in a meeting we were in, and I had to write it down because it felt so apt to this book and well, really everything we do. So yeah, I'll just read it. So this is Sanj Shrikanthan, the CEO of ShelterBox, who said, "The best stories always have at least the possibility of a happy ending. And at ShelterBox, when we talk about disasters, conflict, and climate change, we do so believing that we can make a difference and that a happy ending is possible." So I just wanted to kind of reflect on that and what he said, and that we know that this book is, well, we've coincided this book to come out with COP26, when the world leaders will be talking about the climate crisis and hopefully coming up with some real solutions that can try and address the situation as it is and halt some of the things that are predicted. But yeah, we hope that this book acts as like a rallying cry to draw attention to the seriousness of the climate crisis and the impact it's having on human habitation, which often gets lost in the debate. But we also want it to be a point of hope. We as human beings are able to make a difference. And the way that we do that is by coming together. So we hope that this book acts as both like a warning and a beacon of hope. So thank you so much for joining us, for hearing us talk about it. Thank you so much to our panelists and to everyone who's contributed to create this story. We can't wait for you all to read it, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you very much.